Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 85 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
Do you think that if you took the pneuma grass, you ground it up and smoked it, what kind of high would it be?
Kevin, what pneuma grass are you talking about? It's called pleroma grass.
Do you think if you took the paloma, palo,
Pleroma.
pleroma grass and smoked it, that you could get high?
It's possible. I mean, you smoke a lot of stuff, you can get high.
Question for the ages and the sages. But that's not what we'll be talking about today. Though we will be talking about grass and other things.
Yes, today we're trying to hit up the main plot points of chapter 4, which is, no, we're on chapter 3. Shit, I'm sorry. Um, the audience will see that I am distracted, but for good reasons. But this is a great chapter. I'm just going to start right off the bat by saying that, and I think that like it really is showing how the game is moving. But before we get started, I want to make a couple of notes. Number one, it's my birthday today. I'm turning 30, so you can send me good wishes, even though tomorrow is when this will be released, and I will. It'll be after that. But I am the only Barron's man ever to have his hair at the age of 30. I am taking this family places.
And it's because of the podcast.
It's because of the podcast. It keeps me young. Keeps me young at heart. Keeps me young in body. Second, uh, Pork Bob is the one who made this known, but I noticed it as well, and I'm sure others did too, that my audio last episode was inconsistent. Sometimes it sounded fine. I think most of the time it didn't. Here's why. I was holding my mic in a different way than normal. I was holding it up closer to my face, thinking that it would actually improve the audio. It did not. But, once you record an hour-long podcast, you don't go back and do it again. So for today, I'm at home with my old blue snowball. The audio should be more consistent on this one. Kevin, how you doing?
All in, you ignorant slut.
I am ignorant, alas, not a slut.
I agree with your overview, your impression of this chapter. I thought it was great. I think the only reason for me it does not beat out chapter two is the political trade stuff we got towards the end of the chapter was some of the highest highs for our, niche
Yeah,
particular interests of the Crossbell arc. But we got a lot of plot action, of moving, of character beats. I think chapter two is I enjoy it more. I think chapter three in all of its 4 days, it's a more maybe complete chapter. It does, I think, more than chapter two does for the plot, for the characters, for what we know of as Crossbell.
I mean, I can definitely agree that chapter 2 is like setting stuff up. It's still about introducing us to the geopolitical stuff, setting up the context in which the action happens, which is beginning in chapter 3. We see some really good character moments in chapter 3 that we didn't really see in chapter 2.
You saw it with the SSS, saw that big item with Rishamel. We got some stuff with Kia. It was great.
Fantastic. And also, Kevin can finally unclench his butthole for the scene that I thought the intermission ended with. In fact, is what ends chapter 3.
Is Frostbell burning?
And that is what that image implies, yes.
Well, you Philistine, I was making a reference to the movie based off a book, based off the German Wehrmacht command's directive to devastate Paris in World War II towards the end.
I am sorry, I did not get that reference. I will try to do better. I can't promise that I'll make progress right away, but I will try. But speaking of doing better, I want to address one piece of, I'm not going to say criticism, disagreement that was told to me on Twitter by our good friend Pork Bob. Because Pork Bob and us, we disagree on one fundamental thing, which is the slice of life aspects to trails. So, like, way back when we listened to the audio drama of In Between Zero and Azure, we complained that about half of it was listening to them eat, and going, sugoi. It's not the most interesting thing to listen to. Pork Bob's opinion is that this is more of, showing how the SSS live. We're spending more time with them. We're seeing how they operate as a family, and therefore that's intrinsically valuable. I can see how one would disagree or agree with that. But he brought it up again because we were talking about the restaurant quest in which you have to go all around Crossbell. You can only actually finish it in day 3 if you're going for full DP. And I had brought up that I didn't think it really added that much. It's just some dialogue, maybe like a couple of funny moments, but unlike, say, the doll quest, in which you're also running around, but it ends with this like supernatural thing, it didn't feel like it added anything to the world or to the narrative. And Pork Bob, disagrees with that. He brings up a good point, though, which is that that quest is meant to set up like a peaceful crossbell. Here's what a normal crossbell looks like right before shit hits the fan with the red constellation moving out. We're seeing Ouroboros. The chapter ends on this kind of destructive image of crossbell, to which I had to reply to Pork Bob, well, Kevin doesn't know any of that yet, so I can't tell him that. But I do want to, now that Kevin knows the rest of chapter 3, I want to acknowledge that that point stands.
Yeah. That is acknowledged, it is stood, and I think it's also important to note that the SSS, what they experience in general, is really outside the norm. Most people obviously are not officers, but their day-to-day lives, we don't know how much they encounter monsters or to what degree the frequency is part of the game versus it really is a monster every 7 feet
Yeah.
when you're traveling. I think it's more the former because we don't get the impression that travel from, say, Maine's village to Crossbell is a, particularly dangerous or adventuresome feat for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, so there do seem to be problems when like the bus breaks down. Because they have the orbital lights that keep the monsters away from the roads. And they certainly acknowledge that it can be dangerous. It's why you need the bracer guilds. But also, it's not like people are living in fear of traveling. I mean, look at Hayworth, right? Who has to go all around the state of Crossbell to do commerce. It's not like he's a bracer. He's not a fighter.
No, he's not. Was there more to him than just being Ren's father? Actually, I don't think so. I think that we're full up to our necks in spooky, sus businessmen, and that title
So,
goes to
okay.
Dieter Croy.
Now, of course, we have to go through the plot points, but this question did come up to me when we were playing. Like, we've seen more of Arios. We've seen him interact with members of Ouroboros. We've seen a bit more of. Did we see more of Dieter Croy in this chapter? I don't remember.
Was this chapter the one where he took us out to dinner?
I thought that was the end of the intermission.
I, you are correct. You are correct.
But in any
No, it's
case,
not. No, the
okay.
end of the intermission is Mirabelle being creepy and weird
Maribel is always creepy and weird, but before the end of
with
that
Kia.
part, before the end of that part, though, Dieter Croy is taking us all out to dinner at Hartman's old mansion in Michelin.
Edit out that previous 45 seconds.
I'm not going to. Um,
Yeah, we
so
don't. So Dieter Croy, he's not seen, he's heard, he's talked about, but he's not a physical, visual manifestation in this chapter. Which, now that I think about it, why don't we? No, we see him towards the end when we get the news that the Jaegers have.
right, because he has to. He's coordinating the response, right? He
Yeah,
and
so I
Speaker
think we
McDowell.
should.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
now that we've seen, I mean, number one, everybody's talking about, should we vote for independence? We see Dieter Croy in action with Speaker McDowell. We see Arios. These are the two main people that you've been suspect of. Um, do you continue to be suspect of? Has your opinion changed? Has it stayed the same?
I think the crux of the question is, do I think that there's some false flag at play?
Okay.
Because if I do continue to suspect them, I would have to reconcile that with the wiping out of the company, with the assault on, well, the occupation, what they did to Maine's village, with the assault on Crossbell itself. They could be good actors. I would, I don't think so. I suspect Arios's susness has more to do with the society, with the non-mundane.
Okay.
Dieter Croy, I don't see how you could spin this as a victory unless there's some emergency power, unless he's not working for Crossbell, unless he's working for one of the powers. I think that is the only branching path that leads to how this assault by the Jaegers on Crossbow could be good for whatever his plans are, because it's not good
Hmm.
for the Crossbow state. It's even worse for their independence. You want more independence, more autonomy. You can't even, and it's worse. This is, I think, worse than what happened at the end of Zero. The end of Zero was might, could have. It was potentials, hypotheticals. This is striking at the heart of the Crossbow state, of the eponymous city of Crossbow. We've gone past maybe, could, if,
Hmm.
into they have struck, into the most of the city, much of the city. They've struck with impunity at the Guardian Force. They wiped out, I think, killed, maybe not, but I do think killed
I think there's some death
some
there.
part.
I mean, when Shirley's running around swinging her sword and like there's blood spurting out of these people, I think
Yeah,
it's safe to say they're dead. And I think it's also good to keep in mind the comparison to the end of chapter two, because there we have a terrorist threat, which is it's targeted, relatively small, quickly taken care of. Now, granted, taken care of by Erebonia and by Calvard for the most part, although we help as well. And even that is enough for the great powers to point out that Crossbell can't really defend itself. If you compare it with the Red Constellation, they were present in the heart of the city for a while. They are known affiliates of Erebonia. The CGF had, not CGF, but the police had eyes on them until they decided they didn't want to be seen anymore. They sieged an entire village, basically won a battle with the CGF. Yes, we kind of like sneak up behind them and do some combat, but I don't think it's meant to be implied that we won that battle. It's they decided to pull out. And then it zooms into these fires, and we'll have to see what happens in the next chapter, but it's a incredibly powerful assault. While at the same time, there's weird spooky shit happening that Crossbell also does not know how to deal with the cryptids and whatnot.
I still think Dita's sus, and I still think Oreos is sus. I think their susness is diverging. Oreos just seem like he's more in tune with the supernatural. I don't think we've encountered a major character who is more of the mundane than Dieter Croy. He is with worldly affairs, with Myra, with corporations, with politics. He does not seem the type, and maybe I'll be surprised at the expose to be involved with something so metaphysical as a society.
Okay, we'll have to see. I can neither confirm nor deny anything. So why don't we start at the beginning? So the first thing is, and we should definitely make note of this, is that the opening scene of the chapter is Campanella talking, like in that room that we saw in Trails the Third, to a bunch of the different Anguis, which we have established the plural of should actually be Angues, but they don't do that. They just say Anguis, for both singular and plural, which is incorrect, but that's okay. I have noticed in Cold Steel they also have incorrect Latin when people are casting spells, but I'll complain about that when we get there. Uh, but it's interesting to see more of a light on the different constituent parts. There's a difference between the Anguis and the enforcers, in which the enforcers have autonomy, but the Anguis, even though they're the ones deciding things and making agendas and doing everything, they seem far more bonded to the will of the Grandmaster. What did you think about
Colin,
that scene?
maybe I was misinterpreting the visuals. Maybe it's something more metaphorical, but it seemed to me like they weren't there in human corporeal form. Is that the case?
Yes, they were not there in corporeal form. Because you can even talk about how people are arriving in different places. I think they even state that they're in different locations.
It seemed like they were just not even like, a Zoom call or holograph Star Trek, but like they were lights or just they were part of their essence or being or was there, but their form was not human. I thought it was weird. I don't know what, if anything, were meant to make of it.
I mean, I definitely would point out to you that you see them physically in some cases. Like Arian Road was part of that conversation. Novartis was part of that conversation. We see them physically on day three. Arian Road might not have been,
Yes,
but
yes.
Novartis definitely was. So I don't think that we can say that like, you know, they're ghosts or some shit like that.
No, but can they assume a non-corporeal form? That's not just a visual metaphor for whatever was going on in the scene.
I mean, I don't know if we know enough to make a judgment on that, but it strikes me as more like magical telecommunication.
Okay, so a great big magical Zoom call.
Yeah,
Stuff is heating up with Phantasmal Blaze, I believe it is, in Crossbell.
Phantasmal
Because,
Blaze. Phantasmal Glaze sounds
yes,
like a porno starring ghosts.
or a type of Greek pottery, 8th century dark figure.
Well, this is what maybe this is why I don't have an academic job.
Which, and this is a marked divergence from zero. The society said, in explicit terms, hands-off policy. But what made them change? What's different now? Is it just walking and going through the after effects? Or this is a major change, and it's putting the lie to what I said earlier. Is it Dieter Croy? Could he be, he's not with them, but could he be a fellow traveler? Or is it just an unknown, that exploiting the chaos, the uncertainty because of what's going on with Crossbow, with all these political, hypothetical changes? I don't know. I'm very interested to see what will be the fruit of that. But
It would be
what something made them change their mind to remove the hands-off policy. I think that is fairly obvious.
I don't know if changing the mind is necessarily the best way to think about it. You were telling me off camera it would be great if we could have good transcripts of this game like we did for Trails the Third. Like all of the Sky games have these annotated Let's Plays in textual form that when we need to, we can pull out specific lines of dialogue. With Zero and Azure, we have Trails in the database, but that's such a pain in the ass to navigate, and I can't let Kevin do it because then he'll get spoiled. So I have to do all of that. But the impression that I got from these conversations was that in Zero, the timing wasn't right yet. At that point, there was no real reason for the society to actively interfere. Now, different plans are in motion, and I don't think that it just revolves around Crossbell, although Crossbell is a part of it. One of the Anguis had mentioned the Oathbreaker was operating somewhere. I forget what, but the Oathbreaker is another Anguis. We see him in Curl. So at the same time as things are happening in Crossbell, this guy's off doing something else somewhere else, but it's all part of this Phantasmal Blaze plan.
It's This is happening concurrent with Cold Steel 2. Um,
It's not happening
can I
concurrently with Cold Steel 2, with Cold Steel 1.
Cold Steel 1? Okay, never mind then. I was gonna, or should I bring in my knowledge of Cold Steel 1? I mean, I mean, we
Yes,
can't
you have
pretend I
played it.
don't have it.
So
Yeah,
for those like Griswold who are playing along with the podcast, scrub forward 5 minutes or something like that, so that Kevin can talk about what he knows about Cold Steel 1. But I would just say I'm really looking forward to playing Cold Steel 1 with you now that we've played through all of these, and I want to see like what you recognize. Oh shit, I didn't even
yeah,
know what that was.
all of it. But we'll talk more in detail. So, I don't think, obviously, Osborn, spoilers from here on out, obviously, Osborn has not been assassinated yet.
Correct.
And I forget where he's assassinated.
He's assassinated in the capital city when he's giving a Blood and Iron speech.
Okay, so not in Crossbow itself.
No, not in Crossbow.
Okay. And but the guns at the fortress fire on Crossbow at Garrulus,
Guerrilla.
Guerrilla Fortress, because we're too late to stop them in the Cold Steel 1 prologue, which is also the end of the game, or towards the end of the game.
Towards the end. It's not the end.
So that I think has to be a chapter 4. Or maybe they fired because the Jaegers took over Crossbell.
Maybe.
That's it for the Cold Steel 1. Thoughts, more questions than answers. Spoilers done. Griswold, you can start listening up again.
And how would he know? That's the problem. Like it's not like with the YouTube video, right, where we can just like put spoiler warning, spoiler warning. People listen to this on their phone or in their car.
Riddle for the ages.
So in terms of like what the SSS is doing, there seems to be spooky shit happening, which we've already mentioned, that there are weird metaphysical supernatural creatures spawning in different places around the state called the cryptids. And while we don't know the exact relationship, there is a strong correlation to the presence of what's called pleroma grass. This kind of blue, like I think it's blue. It's been a bit since we played. But it like this blue grass that's kind of eerie that's found in the same locations that these cryptids are located. And there's two things that I want to bring up about this and get your thoughts on. The first is, Kevin, do you remember who's the first person to recognize what they are?
Was he?
It's Wazi. I don't know about you, but throughout this game, each chapter, Wazi gets more and more suspicious to the point where on like the end of day 3, when Randy is leaving, Randy even tells Wazi that he thinks he's figured out what's going on with him. And so my question for you is, what do you think about Wazi? Do you have any predictions about who he is?
Ozzy obviously knows more than he lets on an institutional grand scheme of things level, on an interpersonal level. See how he was waiting up for Randy.
Mhm.
Question for you. Do I have enough pieces to make not an educated guess, but to make either to get the guess or a close approximation?
I think so.
We've not seen, there's not been any moment where he's monologued, gloated to the camera, so to speak. So it's in the quiet things, he's just a half step ahead sometimes, or he knows he's a bit too precise. Gosh, I feel once we know it, it's going to be obvious.
Yeah.
Well, I assume we'll get it in the next chapter or the finale.
Yeah, it's in this game. Like there's so many things I want to point out to you, but then I feel like I'm going to lead you to it.
Is there anything you can point out to me that maybe you could spin it as Kevin, you unobservant slut, you should have caught this.
Well, okay. How about um if we move on to the next topic, that might help actually, because Reese tells us more about pleroma grass because the bishop doesn't want to, right? The bishop seems to recognize that this is forbidden knowledge that he doesn't want to talk to anybody about. But Reese helps us out, and she tells us that the pleroma grass is mentioned in the Apocrypha, which in this universe, the Apocrypha seems to mean texts that are forbidden to be read by non-authorized persons by the Church of Idios, but still contain true information. This is different from the modern Christian conception of the Apocrypha, of which, depending on what time period you're talking about, are either mystical texts that are outside of the canon that you know Christians are not supposed to believe contain any theological truth in them. Maybe they have good moral lessons at the very least, but in terms of like telling you about Jesus or God, they're pretty much worthless. Also, the Protestants consider a subset of the Catholic Bible to be apocryphal. So often you can buy Protestant Bibles with apocrypha, so you can have the full Bible. But that's a very different conception of what the word apocrypha
Or
means.
it can be some of the historical texts. Like I believe Third Maccabees is an apocryphal text in all of the textual traditions.
Yes, yes. Third and fourth Maccabees. Catholics accept one and two. Protestant, I think Jews do as well. Um, and then Protestants don't. But I'm not actually. I don't really know the Jewish their relationship with the Deuterocanon canon because it's a bunch of different stuff. But yeah, so it's that, and it's also things like the Gospel according to Thomas, or the Shepherd of Hermas, stuff like this that are produced in later traditions that maybe are never really even considered part of the Bible, but purport to have religious teachings that the church as an institution decides are not canonical.
When someone says it's in the Bible, question that may be on one's mind is, well, which? Because that will mean different things. Maybe yes, maybe no, depending on the textual tradition involved.
Absolutely. A Catholic
And
Bible is
then
different from Protestant Bible is different than a Jewish Bible.
I want to bring up the Apocrypha in Kaseki, in Falcon. It is more true to the meaning of the term. I quite enjoyed to keep hidden, to keep away. And that's what they're doing with these texts, that they are removed from the public mind, public availability, public consciousness.
Mhm. Absolutely. So the
Now,
reason,
that reminds
well, let me just say,
about Wazi.
yeah, that's what I'm going to bring up. He states that
Okay.
he finds pleroma grass in the scriptures.
What I think could be, but either I don't think, or maybe it's more I hope. I don't want him to be with the church. I feel we've tread that ground already with Kevin Graham, and it would not fit his character.
I'm not taking a stand on who he is or not, but how doesn't it fit his character? I mean, if anybody is comparable to Kevin Graham, it's Wazzy.
Wazzy's does not seem a man of the cloth, even
You think Kevin
the
seems a man of the
Brawls
cloth?
Ritter.
The
He
first
does. I
the
think
first thing Kevin
he
does
does.
when he meets Estelle is try to bang her.
He tries to chat her up respectfully. Wazzy seems like he's come from a different background. One, two, it would have to be a very deep cover with him with the gangs. What happened? He's mentioned, I think, some parts of his life before. So that just seems, I don't know what they would get the church having someone at that level in Crossbell. I mean, I get why the Gralsritter would want someone in Crossbell with the Archbishop being so opposed.
Mhm.
I don't think they would use it on having someone that deep cover for at least a year or two in just so insular downtown politics. I just don't see it for him.
Okay. So if that's not your prediction, do you have a prediction? Or are you not decided?
I want to run through some possibilities and why I think they may or may not work for Wazzy.
Okay.
The church, as I've said, the society, Ouroboros, maybe I'm leaning too much into narrative backgrounds, archetypes, but I feel again we've tread this ground. Having someone that, oh yeah, has a used to be an enforcer or whatever. I don't think that would tell us much of new. We had it with Joshua, and having it again would feel like it make inevitable and I think poor comparisons to Joshua because Joshua's story, his background, I think is superlative. I don't think how they could make it as good the second time around. One,
Hmm.
so two, three. He's part. He can't not a former Jaeger because Randy. Could he be on the pay of Calvert or Erebonian, quote, gone native? Maybe. That may be one of my more likely propositions, hypotheses. It's the Pleroma grass, the cryptids, the Apocrypha. It's kind of suggesting church. I don't want it to be church. Maybe that's why I'm just saying it won't be.
I mean, I think that no matter what stance you take on the whether he's part of the church or not, you have to explain why the testaments are very clearly religiously coded.
Was he just a very well-read individual?
He does seem like a well-read individual, that's true. But to make a gang based off of all of that,
That's what I don't get. How would that help the church? if he is part of the church.
I mean, just to the Catholic Church 2 buildings away from my apartment, they do youth outreach. I don't think Ithaca really has a problem with gangs in the way that a Crossbell might, but you know, I
Why
see the impulse.
have him do it? Why make a gang? Why not do more youth outreach? Why, if it's the church, why don't we get some scene or whatever with the archbishop? If it's the Gralsritter, how would that serve their purposes?
Yeah, I mean that's we have to remember that the overall mission of the Grolls Ritter is to protect artifacts, right? So it is true. I mean, we haven't really seen artifacts in downtown Crossbell.
What artifacts have we seen in Crossbell to date?
Have we seen any?
I don't believe so. That we've been told the church and the society stay out for them. They have stayed out of Crossbell.
Yes.
Reese did not recognize Wazzy, nor Wazzy Reese. I just don't see the church.
All right. Well, we will have. I think we're beating a dead horse at this point, so we should probably move on. Um, Kevin, I did not look this up, so you might not know either. But so you miscalled pleroma grass pneuma grass. Pneuma being Greek for soul or spirit. Pleroma does sound Greek, but I didn't look it up. Does it mean anything?
Yeah. Pleroma, in Gnostic thought, it is, and I quote, the spiritual universe as the abode of God and the totality of the divine powers and emanations. In Christian theology, it's the totality of the Godhead which dwells in Christ.
Interesting. It's something that we very briefly talked about it, but another name for one of Ouroboros' plans, I think the overall plan is named after Orpheus, right? And then now the game at the very least is pulling on terms that are explicitly from Gnostic texts. Let's not even mention the fact that, we have Gnosis, the drug. Uh, they're playing a lot with late antique theological themes in a way that I didn't really think about the first time. Might be worth it to try to do a deep dive at one of these days for a sidebar.
Agreed, agreed. I don't think it's just taking random concepts because they sound cool. There does seem to be a rhyme to this reason, a
Yes.
method to the madness.
Honestly, this wouldn't be the first JRPG to do it. It's a game that we're not playing
No.
for the game challenge, but there is this game, Xenogears. It's pretty infamous. It's not really finished, but so the director had to make a decision. Do we finish the full game gameplay wise, or do we finish the story? And so he decided to finish the story. But the story itself relies a lot on Gnostic, Neoplatonic themes found in Kabbalah. Just a lot of ancient mysticism, and bringing it in the form of the JRPG to talk about the nature of God and the nature of existence, the relationship between man and God. Obviously, that's in one game, and this is throughout an entire series, but it's not outside the norm for Trails to be tapping into some of those themes too.
It involves the society, and say what you like about Kaseki, about Falcom. I think that what they have a plan with Ouroboros, and they seem to be sticking to that across a dozen games or more.
I don't know how much I think they have a plan. I gotta be honest.
No. Well,
Well,
Colin's bitter because of Kuro 2.
I mean, yeah, Kuro too. I mean, I'm optimistically cautious for Kaido Kiseki. Hopefully they can bring things back in. But I mean, I'm not saying that they don't have an overarching plan. I do wonder sometimes how much that plan changes in order to like make new games. Um, or to like, okay, we need to set up this one thing, so let's change all of these things around that kind of breaks down. I don't know. I'm just saying that like for the most part, you'd think that you would know a lot more about Ouroboros than you do after 12 games. I guess it's a spoiler telling you that we don't find out as much as you might want to know throughout the course of it all. But at some point in 2 years of this podcast, I have to point out there's still a lot of questions about Ouroboros that I don't know the answer to.
You get some information.
Yes, exactly. I'm about to say, speaking of questions about Ouroboros, we go into the Rosenberg doll factory that also I don't say dog. I always say dog, and that in that point dog came out. I don't know. Anyway, we get to ask some questions about the internal workings of Ouroboros, most of which I feel like as players we already knew from prior games, but there's some new stuff in there. What did you think about that whole scene? You know, the vibe of the Rosenberg factory, learning more about York, learning more about the organization. What did you think?
Two things came to mind. One, it's a further emphasis. It's not a unified organization. There's not just competition, but it seems going a step further, conflict among the top-ish level members of the society. Two, this is not a group where you leave feet first. Then special case, but York seems to have divested himself of the society. And that surprised me because Colin, he, I assume, had to been known a good deal, if not ultimate plans, and at least enforcers, anguies, information, whatever that would make him very valuable to anyone who is anti the society. So why not silence him? Why allow him to be neutral?
Right,
I was surprised.
and plus, it's not like Ouroboros is really leaving him alone. We've seen him talk to Campanella and Novartis.
Yes,
I don't know if he's like uninvolved. It's
he
just that he's not a partisan. They might
no,
get technology from him. You know, they might use him in the same way that I might go and order a cake from a Wegmans and in that sense use that baker. But I also wouldn't call like Jorg is not an Anguisse. He's not an enforcer.
no. I believe he was at one point in Anguisse.
What evidence do you have for that?
Didn't he say so?
I don't think so.
He does not seem to be an enforcer type. He seems more cerebral.
That's
There's
true.
no
Yeah.
offense to Joshua or to Luva. A lot of the enforcers that we've seen don't seem to put their thinking caps to good use. They're not strategic, I should say.
Campanella seems pretty strategic.
I don't know what to make of Campanella.
We've seen a lot of Campanella this chapter. And he just
We
loves
have more.
messing with us.
I would not be surprised if he's not really an enforcer, if that's a cover within a cover.
I mean, even his title is weird. He's enforcer number 0, right? Normally you start with 1. And there is an enforcer 1 that we'll meet down the line. He also is like an observer, right? Like he didn't step in to save Iceman. He was clearly on orders by the Grand Master, the only enforcer that seems to be, right? The other enforcers take orders from Anguis, or rather choose to cooperate with different Anguis depending on what they want.
Yes,
But Campanella is different.
he is. Maybe he's the first. The like an archangel type, or the first of the I don't something. Maybe he was created. Maybe he's artificial. Don't know.
Don't know. And that's one thing that I can tell you to this day. I don't know.
After the dollhouse, we get notified about a train derailment on the West Crossbell Highway. We go and investigate. I want to say one thing quick, Colin, and
Oh,
you
sure.
know, I'm not a bloodthirsty man.
I cannot wait for this neoliberal stuff to come out.
Well, peace reigns in my heart. However, I would have liked it if people had died.
Oh, you mean from the yeah, I mean it doesn't make any sense for a trail to derail like that, there to be no casualties.
Well, there are casualties, but no deaths,
Okay, no fatalities.
no fatalities. And again, we've noticed this a lot. Crossbell, for the most part, sorry, Kiseki, for the most part, seems really adverse to death.
I mean, remember we talked about this when Luva lands a dragon on top of a mall and nobody's hurt.
I remember arguing people should have died.
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean, I agree that they should have died. I still think that that action by Luva was indicative of him trying to minimize casualties rather than, exacerbate them. But, Trails is at its best when it leans into its darker aspects and is willing to take
Yes.
risks. I mean, even in this chapter, seeing Shirley slaughter random soldiers, or when we see Red Constellation mow down terrorists, that death is final. That death is important. It's showing that there's real consequences. But most of the time, when there's like warfare going on, these people are incapacitated, or there's a gigantic accident. Okay, well, everybody goes to the hospital and then they're fine. Like, it kind of takes the teeth out of things.
Shying away from lasting consequences. And that's not a good thing for a video game franchise RPG with the scale and stakes of Kiseki, or for most media in general. Consequences add tension and weight.
Absolutely. But speaking of consequences, it seems like our good friend Wald, who you forgot who he was, is taking drugs. Why don't you tell us a bit about his drug use?
Kids, don't do drugs. This podcast is brought to you by Dare. If you do drugs, you will literally turn into a demon.
I have to say, the DARE program worked on me. I don't do drugs.
I was doing lines of coke in the bathroom in middle school, so
Wait, really?
no.
Okay, because sometimes I
Jesus.
never know with you.
So Walt is the leader of the other gang in the downtown area.
Yeah,
He took Gnosis, and he took Gnosis in a way, he responded to Gnosis in a way differently than Joachim Gunter. It was stable. He kept his higher order faculties, his reasoning, his personality. It wasn't, oh, I'm dying. And he used it to go play Donkey Kong with Train. So you can get power and godhood, but you know, you can't do anything with it if you're not ambitious, I guess.
well, you definitely at least have to have a goal.
And are we just skipping over the cryptids?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what else there is to say about the cryptids other than they're there and we fight them. Do you have something else you
You
want to say
find the
about?
fight easy?
Yes, all of the fights in this chapter were easy because I play on normal. And we haven't gotten to the boss that you want to complain about. Let me just finish talking about Wald because the boss you want to complain about is after, but then I want to hear your full rant about that boss because I saw it happen in real time. Uh, but I do find it interesting that, as you point out, the reaction that Wald has isn't exactly the same as Gunter. And I remember talking near the conclusion about how, it kind of seems like we should have somebody who would volunteer to become a demon in order to get like this foreknowledge that Gunter claims to have, that he can see all of the consequences and see the future,
Yeah,
all that shit. But Wald does not seem to have that. Now, we don't know. Is this just the difference of Wald's physiology? Is it different gnosis? Because there's different types of gnosis. We need to figure that out.
I don't think there's different types, or I hope there's not different types of gnosis. That would seem to be they're changing the rules of the game without telling us.
No, I'm pretty
We've,
sure they told us that in Zero. There was gnosis that would just like bring out your best abilities, and the other ones that would turn you into a demon.
yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean multiple different demon types.
Ah, yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
if
we saw like, gnosis and full gnosis. Yeah.
I don't know if we know that yet. And by yet, I mean it might have been said, and I just don't remember. There is like so something that we haven't been talking about is that every so often we find a quartz fragment that's supposed to fill in some of the gaps about like the history of the DG cult and the creation of Gnosis. One of these days we should do a because we can just find all of them online, like we've been doing with the novels. But we should probably do a short sidebar where we read through them and talk about what they mean.
Agreed, agreed. But Wald does not have omniscience, precognition, pericognition of any sort.
No, he just turns into an Omi. And I gotta say, because I was fighting him, and the game made it out to be like I couldn't beat him. But the only reason why I couldn't beat him was because they ended the fight and told me that I couldn't beat him. I think with enough time I could have beaten him.
Well, I got killed like one turn.
And then the game continued.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so just so you know, if you outlast, like if you're able to keep up, eventually the battle just ends and says, "See, you can't defeat me!" Ha 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 ha. And then it keeps going.
What do you think about that? about
I
that
don't.
tactic that games use.
I mean, to some extent, it can work. You have to find good ways to make it work, and sometimes Trails is successful, sometimes it's not. And in that particular one, it wasn't. Um, because there is, I think something valuable about, you know, having a strong enemy that canonically you cannot defeat, um, but still giving you the opportunity to like go all out and fight him. Similarly to because you had gotten to this point in Dragon Quest V when you first fight against the guy who kills your father. You cannot beat that. You can try and you can extend that fight out, but eventually you will lose. Um, I don't think like the game is programmed to let you win that fight. But because it still lets you try, you suffer the consequences of eventually your HP will go to zero, and then you will wake up in the tower 10 years later. That's effective. Something else that Trails can do sometimes is to set um, limits, as in, like, your goal is not to defeat him, your goal is to get him to 50%. Within a certain amount of turns. And if you do that, then you get extra DP as a way to incentivize you and reward you for putting in the effort of trying to win an impossible fight, but at the same time, also reinforcing that you're not actually meant to win this fight.
I don't like is when they um like you could use very valuable aids, buffs,
Yep.
items on
Yep.
unwinnable fights. And I get I just don't like that. It seems unfair.
It's like you have to kind of guess that it's an unwinnable fight, and sometimes they telegraph
Yeah.
it well, but sometimes they don't. So why don't you talk about, speaking of unwinnable fights, why don't you tell us about the cryptid that you were stuck on?
Colin, Colin, Colin. I I don't know how many times I tried to use this fight. It I
Well, tell our audience which one it
I
is
think
first.
oh, so it's the end. It's the I'm not sure it's cryptid. Maybe I think it is.
Yeah, it is. It's
Fight in
on
the
the end of day
wetlands,
three.
end of day three, right after the big Rishamel reveal.
Yeah.
You see the engineer in Avortis, Avian Road, and Campanella, and they summon the guardian of the place, this big lion. So I look at the stats on Nightmare and then compare that to other bosses. It had like 70, 72, 75,000 HP. I think she only had like 20 at most or about.
Okay.
So it's a huge HP sponge. The damage it did was a lot. The status ailments it inflicted, like sometimes I would die without doing 1,000 damage. So I was 72 level. So I grinded for I don't know how long to get to 74, and it still barely won. For whatever reason, I don't think it was good on Nightmare. Like it's not a well balanced fight on Nightmare. There's a lot of fights I think they're challenging, but you get into a rhythm, you know how to do it
Right.
on Nightmare, and those I like. This I don't think for whatever reason I don't think it was well constructed, well thought out
I do
because
think
the
that
HP was too high.
I do think that Azure is supposed to be the most difficult game on Nightmare. At least that's what I've heard.
Interesting.
So how did you actually beat it?
I used the buff, the burst. I
Mhm.
had Ellie and Tio just heal, casting time or space orts, get them down, make liberal use of Ellie's A craft and Tio's S craft to heal to get invulnerability. And got lucky on some missed, trying to make Lord an evasion tank. Got a lot lucky and barely won. It was touch and go.
Did you feel fulfilled having finished it, or you're just like, thank God this is over?
The ladder, Colin, the ladder. 7 ways to Sunday. Thank God it's over. There
Like,
have been fights, like the Joaquin Gunter fight, end of at zero, took a number of tries, but I knew what I did wrong and how to stop it.
right.
And I felt fulfilled. I thought it was a great boss fight.
With this, you were so frustrated. It took you like 3 days to do it.
Yes, I took time off. I read well, I don't want to say trashy, but semi-trashy YA mystery novel that I loved. I did other things. I tried it, like you suggested, a couple times at a go each session, and then just put the game down and other more productive things with my life. Eventually beat it, and the sun came out. I heard the chorus of angels. Beautiful.
I mean, I will say that tactic that I shared with you, I can share it to um, the audience as well, because it's something that I did with Dragon Quest V, which is that sometimes you just realize that you have a task that is too big for you to handle right now. You want to go and do other things, but you don't want to let this game go. So for me in Dragon
Mhm.
Quest, I realized that I wanted to get the best equipment for my hero and for my children at the end of the game, which require just an extraordinary amount of grinding for money, um, which is not difficult, but it is tedious and it took a long time. And nobody wants to sit there and do it for 10 hours a day. Now, granted, Kevin, don't get scared right away. I'm playing the SNES version, you're playing the DS version. I don't know the differences there. But I just decided, okay, for my morning coffee, I'll go and grind. And then I'll go off and do the rest of my day, play trails, play this, play that. And within a week or two, I now have all the in-game equipment, and then all I have to do now is go do the last boss. But I've done this at the end of Ukulele. I found that final boss to be quite difficult, but just said, okay, every morning I'll do this like 3 times, and then eventually it clicks and I win. But it means that I can also go and enjoy myself for the rest of the day as opposed to just keep throwing myself against the wall over and over and over again. So if there are any of you out there experiencing this kind of phenomenon, highly recommend, you know, put it on grind, put it on farm.
Well, I'll say one thing quickly about DQ5, and then we'll move on because this is not the DQ5 podcast.
Sure.
I've not had any tough fights yet.
Yeah. There's like two fights that I found difficult so far.
Well, you're just about done with the game, so you
Yeah.
should know most of them.
I mean, I'm assuming that the final boss might be difficult, although skewed because I've done a lot of grinding. There's like one boss that's optional at the end. Uh, there's like a side quest you can do that caught me by surprise, but luckily I managed to pull that out. But like that was tough. Every so often, like there's a challenging boss, but I agree. In the childhood stage, there's no challenging bosses. And in like the early hero stage that you're in, nothing difficult. Where are you at in that game?
Not made that much more progress beyond getting rid of Harry.
Okay. Well, it is looking like at the
Even
current pace, we're not doing the Dragon Quest episode by the end of June, but early July. I think we can do that.
miracles can happen.
Miracles can happen. I mean, hey, I have a date tonight. That's proof enough of that. Um,
You know, it's another miracle.
what else is a miracle, Kevin?
Learning the identity of Yin.
Well, it's interesting because we've always known it, right? It's the SSS that didn't know it.
So that was a dramatic tension, which is we know something, the characters don't. Do you think it worked here? Should we have found out with the SSS?
No,
No, why not?
I think that there's a lot of interesting conversations about like in between Risha and Sao that we only see through the Yin persona. And the impact that those conversations have on Risha is only understandable by us if we know that Yin is Risha. Similarly, like there's that moment between Risha and Lloyd and Michelin in which Risha's kind of like opening up. And I think that we need to know that she's yin in order to understand the character arc that she's going, right? Because she's actively trying to grapple with competing loyalties. Should she remain loyal to Highway? Should she be going on her own thing? She feels this pull between her duty to be yin and the fact that she has her own life and her own friends in Calvert. I do think that the yin persona is a little bit too different than the Risha that we know. And then it's almost like once the mask falls off, the Yin persona is gone too. I kind of would have
Yes.
liked to, at least so far, I would have liked to have seen more of like it's Risha's face, but she's acting like the Yin that we know. and we might see more of that. But no, I do think that we should have known. Seeing a lot of Risha's inner moments when she's encountering different characters, right? Like I had pointed out when we meet Shirley during that cat quest. That's also the first time that Risha meets Shirley, and then we see that she knows who Shirley is, and that wouldn't hit the same if we didn't know that Risha was Yin.
Yeah, that's true. And the conversation that say we have with Rishamel at Mishi Resort, that midnight conversation would not have hit nearly as hard or at all unless we knew that Yin and Risha were one of the same about, what path being conflicted.
Exactly.
So there's that.
Well, and honestly, man, it's not just it wouldn't have hit nearly as hard. What it would have been would be the first time Risha has any character development. The entirety of her character in Zero and Azure only works because we know the tension between her being Yin and being Risha. And so then at that point, the conversation becomes like a change in her character. We can see her turmoil, see how she's grappling with things.
Yes.
But we had already considered Risha to be a character. But I think without Yin, she would have been completely flat until halfway through the second game, talking about these traumas and conflicts that we know nothing about.
Well, like, girl, we know fuck all.
Right. Which might become
She's more
interesting at that point.
complex.
We want to know more about it, but I think knowing that she's Yin just makes that it doesn't just make it hit better, it makes it work.
Makes it more complex, which for the most part means more interesting, and that's what we want with characters. But I want to point out one thing.
Yep.
We don't really get any time to decompress without knowledge. So much
No.
happened with the Jaegers, with Randy. You get one optional scene in Arkansas where there's no denouement in that climax. And looking at what's going to happen in chapter four, we may not get that character to character decompression, for lack of a better term. So it's going to sit for a good while. I'm not sure how long without the what does this mean? This shift in the worldview exactly.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, but I think that that kind of works here. The whole reason why the SSS has now learned that Yin is Risha is because of the chaos that's happening in Crossbell. Frankly, they don't have time to care about that right now. There are bigger fish to fry. And so I think the fact that there's no denouement or no time for the parties to like register it or to really like think about it that much, I think that's good.
I'm
'Cause
not saying it's a complaint. It's an observation more than anything.
By the way, speaking of Ark and CL, because we haven't talked about any side quests, and we probably won't, but there is one that I kind of wanted to bring up because it offers an alternative gameplay style. There's a hidden quest. If you go and talk to Sully on day three, you can help her with her dance practice, and it turns into a rhythm game in which you have to press the X or the circle button or like A and B button whenever she hits the ground. I'm not sure how true this is. It felt like the game did not take into account the lag that you might find on console versions with having Bluetooth controllers and stuff. So I found it kind of difficult to like really get a good rhythm on it. But I want to praise it for being a side quest that's basically a mini game. I think that we need more of stuff like that in Trails to like give it a good piece of variety. Um, because other than like the Michelin attractions, there hasn't really been much in terms of gameplay variety in these side quests, right? They're just narrative or run around here, talk to that guy, or fight this monster. But with Sully's quest, it was like a legit different type of gameplay.
Colin, I have a confession to make
Okay.
about the mini games. I've played a good amount of Pom Pom Party.
It's pretty good. I do like Pom Pom Party.
It's good. It's good. I enjoy it. I think it's a good mini game.
I don't have a lot of people to play because I don't actively search out people's addresses, but it's fun and we see it in other entries. So you can rest assured of that.
What is the relevance to the Sully job? Silly mini game, absolutely nothing.
I mean, it's relevant in that it's a mini game. It's a different gameplay style. I'm actually kind of surprised that you like it.
Sauce Bell Independence. This, I'm a man of multitudes.
It's true. I should have held a poll. Do you think Kevin likes Pom Pom Party? And I am sure that 75% would say no. 25,
At least,
but sometimes Kevin knows how to have fun too. But speaking of characters,
sometimes.
and sometimes he likes to have fun. Speaking of like intense character moments, inner turmoil, we need to come to day four. All of a sudden, Red Constellation withdraws from the city, and Randy feels responsible. He feels like he's the one that needs to go in and stop this because he's supposed to be the next head of Red Constellation. You know, like at least they want him to be. He feels the need to protect the SSS from that, so he's going to go it alone. He gets his old gun slash chainsaw, and he goes off on basically a suicide mission. Um, the SSS tracks him down. It manages to help him out so that he survives. And then we just have this great conversation between Randy and Lloyd. The music playing is somber. Gotta say, man, I mean, I want to hear your opinion on this, but to me, that is one of the best scenes I've ever experienced in a video game. Just the raw emotion, the understandable reactions from both Lloyd and from Randy. Uh, Definitely, I shed a tear, and I felt the relief when Randy could finally accept the love of his friends.
The scene with Wazzy, the scene after, they were great moments. A number of reasons. With Wazzy, Randy is in the thralls of self hatred, some self pity, but I think a lot more self hatred. He doesn't think he's worthy enough to be with them, to have them be his friend. He's going to go try to atone for his mistakes, try to make it right. I don't think he thinks he can atone.
No, he doesn't.
And Wazzy knew it was going to happen. Wazzy knew, or had a very good guess. He's out there waiting for Randy. And he told Randy he wouldn't let the SSS wouldn't give up the game, and he doesn't. He keeps his word. I
Yeah.
don't know how often, if ever, we've seen him lie. So,
He's not a duplicitous man.
no, he's not revealing much. He's ambiguous, but he's not duplicitous. So we go find Randy, and then this stuff with Shirley and whatever. But afterwards, Randy. So we go to the path of Maine's mountain. We see Randy fighting. I think killing. I really do think killing
I don't think he was
because
killing. We didn't see any blood
oh,
from his weapon strikes where we do with
okay,
but I know what you mean because he's like shooting motherfuckers. But that appears not to be enough.
okay. I was going to say because they make the point he was not going to go out and confront with only a stun halberd. He was going to go out get bring out the weapons, the tools of the trade.
Yeah.
So he fights. I think he. I wonder. And tell me if you think I'm right, Colin. Does Randy go in thinking he's going to die?
Yes. I think he has to think that.
It's a suicidal charge, and I think a part of him, really large part, wants to die, and his fast living, whatever. It's not until this moment. I don't think it's active suicidal ideation. I just think it's a he thinks he deserves to die and he wants to live until that happens. Here, I think it crosses over into actively trying to make it happen, to go down with the fight, but wanting to die.
But
But
in a way, it's
he doesn't.
also like that death would be the only thing that could atone him, right? All of his guilt is
Yes,
from him being part of the Red Constellation. He feels responsible for the Red Constellation, offering a danger to those he loves and to the city that he now calls home. And so, even though he knows
personal.
he's going to die, he's like, I have to fight back.
It's personal. It's not just the red constellation. I think we get more details here what he himself has done. It's what his actions, the lives he himself has taken, the
Mhm.
innocents he's killed, that or his ghosts. And I think it's good. I don't think it would work if it was the collective what the Jaeger group done. I think it has to be, and it is. What have I done?
Yes. And likewise, I think that it's good that, Lloyd and Randy kind of have this tense conversation, and then Lloyd accepts him, forgives him, because somebody needs to forgive him. And I think narratively, like and personally wise, Lloyd's the only one who can. Not to say that he has like the power of a priest to forgive or anything like that, but in terms of respect, knowledge of Randy, to some extent power over Randy, but then also just the friendship and the brotherliness. For Lloyd to hear all of that, to know who Randy is on the deepest fundamental level, and to say, we know that and we love you. I think that's the only thing other than death that could in any way alleviate Randy's guilt.
He does not want to forgive himself. He is lashing out when the others do.
Yeah,
He does not think he deserves it.
it is not. The game
And
does
it's
make,
guilt, it's PTSD, I think.
oh, definitely. And you know what? How serious all of this is, the game makes one really unfortunate comparison that I don't think is
Yes.
good. It is not the same thing as
No.
people forgiving Tio for being tortured as a child. Like, what the fuck?
Having it done to her against her will, against her consent, being violated in that manner.
Yeah. I mean, in the basic notion of knowing somebody's past and accepting them for who they are, sure, that's the same thing. But nobody ever blamed Tio for anything. She didn't do anything to deserve any of it. Whereas Randy, as Kevin has pointed out every single episode, is a war criminal.
Yeah, he was him actively doing it. That unfortunate item behind beside this feels, Colin, to me, like one of the I think the culmination of Randy's character arc.
Yeah,
His demons aren't exercised, but I think it's downhill from here for what he's a changed man now compared to before. This was the crucible and he passed through it. He's different now.
but I think that in terms of narrative structure, getting Randy, like in terms of all the characters of the SSS and the involvement with the overall plot, Randy is the most involved because of his past with the Red Constellation. And I think that it's interesting. Like, they don't make Randy's culminating moment be during the attack on Crossbell by the Red Constellation,
No,
right? It's not like he's charging out of the SSS building to defend his found family against his former family in a way like that. They intentionally put it on the outside. And then, I mean, again, we'll see what happens in chapter four. I'm not trying to talk about what happens in chapter four, but I think it's pretty clear that we have to go there. Like, the SSS isn't going to like
yeah,
stand there and watch the Crossbell burn, but we're doing all of that with this moment having already happened, and I think that's really interesting.
no. I mean, no, you're right. That did not happen there. It's I prefer it because I think it's going to be jam-packed with plot moments, and taking the time to have this character be just feels like we're ramping up the main plot of the game of the Crossbelt arc, and I
Yeah,
don't think it would have fit in there.
probably not. Because in order for Randy's character moment to shine, you need to slow things down, right? You need to have this kind of like falling action after beating Shirley to have this one-on-one personal moment, and then the game ratchets it back up with that cliffhanger scene of Crossbell in flames. So, Kevin, any final thoughts on this chapter? Any predictions you want to make before we call it an episode?
It's game time now for Frostbell, for the Jaegers, for the society in a different way, I think. I Frostbell is going to come out looking very different. I'm not sure how. I It's going to be very different.
Mhm.
Maybe independent, maybe so going to be independent or annexed. That's my prediction. we're not going to. The status quo is it's failed demonstrably twice in a row now.
Yeah. And like in pretty short period of time. Maybe a couple of months in between, if that.
I think Dieter and Arios are working not together, but taking advantage of the other. If that makes sense.
Well, here's a question for you. So if they're taking advantage of each other or working together or not working together, what do you think they're trying to? Because I know that you think that ultimately these are the main villains. Uh, at this point, like we're over halfway way through the game, things are happening. If these are your main villains, what do you think their goals are?
Um, I think Dieter is more personal in the material, political realms. What exactly? I'm not certain. I could see the argument he wants one of the two sides to win, Empire or Erebonia.
Erebonia
Arios,
is the Empire.
Or Erebonia or Calvert.
Okay.
Arios, it just seems metaphysical. Maybe about his dead wife. He's tired of having his weekends be parenting, wants to go out to the town, let loose. I don't know,
Well,
raise her from the dead. I don't, it's
wants
something
Suzanne to be able to see
metaphysical.
again.
Yeah, it's going to be not with the society, but something connected, or maybe he and the society want different goals from the same whatever, or something. It's I feel safe predicting Data the mundane, Oreos the magical. I don't think I have more details as to what, but I do think I'm fairly spot on. I'm fairly confident with dividing up the shenanigans. Can I make a comparison? It's like Richard is Dieter Croy for the mundane,
Hmm.
maybe the unwitting stooge of higher powers, and Weissman is not Oreos, but Weissman's being more into the metaphysical is like Oreos more into the metaphysical. I don't think Oreos cares that much about Crossbell's governance. I think Dieter Croy cares very much.
Okay.
Is
Well,
that
I want to
specific enough, you think?
I want to point out that when asked what you thought Arios's goals were, you said to not be a parent on the weekends, which I think is pretty
Yes,
funny. But
facetious. But it's about I do think it's going to involve his wife and his daughter.
I guess I want to push you more on Arios and his relationship to the supernatural. I want to know what you mean by that, because the way that I've seen it so far, like, does he operate in the shadows, quote unquote? I mean, yeah, there's a couple of times in which he's like observing everything, and like Ren walks up to him and they chat. He clearly knows about Ouroboros. He also states that the guild knows about Ouroboros because of Estelle and Joshua. I mean, Cassius is the one that had told Estelle and Joshua about that because he's an S-ranked bracer. Same thing with Arios. So I don't know if that's a necessary condition. And we've also seen Arios be involved in the political process, right? He's there as an observer during the trade conference, for instance. So why are you saying that Arios is more on the supernatural than the political? Like what's giving you that feeling?
He is an observer, but because of his prestige, I don't think he doesn't strike me the type who cares all that much. Nothing that we've seen him say. Everything we've seen Data say has made me confident about him being in the mundane. We need
Sure.
someone for the supernatural that we've seen before. I think just as a narrative gameplay wise, it has to be that something not just pulled out of. I don't think it can just fall on the shoulders of the engineer. We've not had enough history. Arios' arc, I don't. It seemed there's something that needs to be done with it. He's has to be something active, not passive.
I mean,
I don't think there's room for him in the political world. I think there's room for an arc in the supernatural.
I think it's interesting you put it that
Maybe
way because Arios
I'm
doesn't really
going
have
too
a
much on narrative.
I th I mean, I'm not making any judgments on that, but I'm just trying to get your thoughts. But I do think it's interesting that, like, if I were to define Arios's arc 1.5 games into the Crossbell duology, I don't think he's changed. I don't think he has an arc right now.
He's not. But I think he kind of needs one. He doesn't seem unimportant enough where a static arc would be expected.
Okay. Do you think Cassius has an arc? This is just me being curious because to me, Arios and Cassius kind of play the
Yes.
same role. This very powerful bracer that's like everybody else is in awe of, and he might come in during the most dangerous moments. Everybody knows him. But like Cassius, I don't think changes. Not really.
I think he does. A couple things. His relationship with Joshua and Estelle, how he sees his role as his father, his political relationship vis-a-vis the Bracer and Liberal,
Okay, that part's true. Yeah, where
his
like he retires from the bracers to go back to the military.
yes, there's a definite change how he interacts with Estelle, with Joshua and Estelle. It's a relational change more than Cassius himself changing, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I definitely think he has an arc. And I think Arios won't have one. And there's only room in the narrative in the mystical world.
All right.
Remember that surgery with Shizuku? It was
This,
not
this is the first time you've
entirely,
ever said her name correctly.
and there's weight behind it. It was not 100% successful, I don't believe.
No, but it wasn't unsuccessful either.
No. I would not be surprised if he wants something spooky with his daughter. Like help her, fix her, whatever. I could see him sacrificing himself for his daughter. Something, I don't know. It's going to be involving shenanigans.
All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to say about chapter 4 before we call it?
I bet we learn a lot about Wazi.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Why don't you take us out?
We're in the home stretch. Done with chapter three, on to chapter four. We've got the chapter, the last chapter, you've got the dungeon. We're going to see stuff answers. We're going to see stuff coming together. I cannot wait to see all my predictions brilliantly play out 100% accurate because I am a genius.
And you're never wrong about anything. You also you've never had it where you were right about something and then convinced yourself to not be right anymore.
Cannot wait to see Collins. You stumbled upon X, or you thought maybe, but then discarded. It'll be great. I think the retrospective for this game for the Crossbell duology should be a hoot and a holler, as
Oh,
the
hell
kids
yeah.
say.
As the kids say. Or it's true, they used to say it.
Yes. Until then, as always, I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next time on Dragon Ball Z on
On Dragon
Trails in
Quest
the
V.
Pod.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.